Greater Cincinnati seems to have this love-hate relationship with the cicadas. We love them enough that we create bobbleheads of them, like the one behind me. We create songs about them. We've even created an app, Cicada Safari, that you can take pictures of and register when you see a cicada. But you know what? We also hate them enough that we sometimes have to change our summer plans because of them. Well, one person who greets the cicadas like presents on Christmas morning is our friend, Dr. Gene Kritsky from Mount St. Joe. Dr. Kritsky, thanks so much for being with us.
I'm glad to be here.
You are the hardest working man in showbiz right now, doing all these interviews all over the globe talking about the cicadas. But before we start talking specifically about Brood 10, let's talk about just the cicadas in general in the Midwest, because almost any summer here in our area, you will hear cicadas, maybe not in the massive group that we'll have this summer, but explain a little bit about the different broods and their timing when they come up.
Certainly. Well, Ohio is home to 20 species of cicadas. There are 6 periodical cicada species, and then there are 14 annual cicada species and subspecies. And it's pretty easy to tell them apart. The annual ones we hear all the time. And just as you just said, I get this every year. Didn't we just have cicadas? The periodical cicadas, like you see behind me, are these, they come out in usually starting in mid-May, and they last through the end of June. They've got red eyes, black bodies, wings with large orange colored veins, and legs with orange colors to them as well. And they come out in incredible numbers to overwhelm the predators, to feed the predators all the cicadas they want and still have millions more to consume. Annual cicadas will start coming out around the 1st of July. Indeed, some years you may have an overlap of a couple of days, but I've actually, in 1987, I heard my last periodical cicada on June 30th, and I heard my first annual cicada on the 1st of July. They come out right in early July, and they'll be with us through October. And they come out in smaller numbers. Their coloration is green, black, and brown. Some are like they're wearing camouflage, and they come out, as I mentioned, in small numbers, and they're up in the trees. You hear them calling, but you can't find them very easily because they're backlit, but also they're camel colored, and so they're a little stealthier in their survival performance. But it's pretty easy. Those will be around next year. Next year we won't have any periodical cicadas here. We'll have to wait up till 2025 to get our next batch. But that's the way you can separate the two. Is one's going to be out early and one comes out later. But look at the eyes. If the eyes are red, if it looks like it's been out partying a little too much over its adult life, it's probably a periodical cicada. And as long as it's May and June, you're in good shape.
I'll remember that if I get close enough to them. 15 states, District of Columbia, will have Brood 10 coming up here in a few weeks. Why is this brood so large?
Well, the distribution of broods is in result patterns that occurred after the last ice age. Let's take Cincinnati as a case. 20,000 years ago, the ice sheet was just north of Tri-County Mall. There were no cicadas here because there's no forest. And so as that ice sheet retreated, and about 14,000 years ago, it was just north of Toledo. As the ice sheet retreated, forests came in and the cicadas came with them. And that's what's involved with the distribution of all of Brood 10. If you look at where the glaciers were in the eastern part of the United States, they didn't get as far to that's where the glaciers stopped in that part of the country. And so periodical cicadas are really bugs of climate. Their distribution is going to be related to the geological history that followed the last ice age, and the time when they emerged during the month of May is related to temperature, and when they come out early sometimes once in a while, it's related to increasing temperatures.
With the fluctuating temperatures that we've had this spring, is that going to delay the cicadas coming out a little bit?
These cool temperatures could delay the cicadas a day or so, but they're still not mature enough, ready to come up. If we had 64 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature tomorrow, they would not come up because they develop these little black patches behind their eyes just before they're ready to emerge, and that hasn't happened yet. But if these cold temperatures persisted, it could delay the emergence by a day or two. But you need to have a week-long period of long, really cold temperatures. That happened in 2008 when Brood 14 emerged in Cincinnati. Right after they first came out, we hit a cold spell for about almost 8-9 days where the high got in the low 60s, the low temperatures in the low 40s in some cases, and it was rainy, and we didn't have any cicadas coming up at all for like 5 days. The whole thing was interrupted, and then they came out again, and when the temperatures warmed up.
So let us talk about our friends in Brood 10. Is it true that there will be more on the east side than the west side?
Actually, there'll be probably more Brood 10 cicadas on the west side. The east side is primarily home to Brood 14. But what my research has shown over the last 34 years is that 14 is having a significant number of their cicadas coming out 4 years early. So so for example, back in 2004, I was able to document that in Madeira, for example, Brood 14 cicadas did come up early with Brood 10 last time, and those offspring of those cicadas are going to come out this year. So that'll keep the numbers really high there. But overall, the eastern edge of Brood 14 is going to stop Brood 10 from coming out that far. Basically, we'll have more cicadas on the west side than the east side, because the east side is home to Brood 14. There are instances that we've been able to document where some Brood 14 cicadas, which is due in 2025 here, they're coming out 4 years early. So those are coming out this year, but that shouldn't have as big of an impact as what we're going to see on the west side of Cincinnati. I found that the most intense numbers emerging was 356 per square yard. That was in Delhi back in 2004. In parts of Hyde Park, I measured up to 250 per square yard. Now, wherever you had a few that you may or may not recall, but in 2017, we had the unexpected early emergence, and that was pretty significant in a number of areas. Finneytown, Mount Healthy, parts of Delhi. We had parts of Springfield Township, all had cicadas coming out, and every cicada that came out in 2017 is one fewer that's going to come out this time around.
So what is it with cicadas in Cincinnati? As I said, that we kind of have this love-hate relationship with them. It's only for a small period of time. It's only a few weeks that we have these cicadas, at least in the big numbers that we will have them, but we're kind of consumed with them.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why we should be consumed with them. One, it turns out during the Brood 10 emergence years, the Cincinnati Reds have won 2 pennants, and they had a better win-loss record than they normally have. So I have great hopes this year because of the cicadas in Brood 10 and the Cincinnati Reds. I was surprised when I moved to Cincinnati in 1983. I came here in part because of cicadas. I knew there were 2 broods here, and I could study those as part of my research. But what really surprised me was the interaction with my fellow citizens. Like, you're right. People are really into this. It's like this event. And that sort of crystallized for me that these are bugs of history. If you were here in 2004, you remember what happened. If you were a kid here and you got a chance to experience it when you're 10 years old, you remember that. Mm-hmm. And that may be 17 years ago. It could be 34 years ago. It could be 51 years ago. And these stories stay with you. And that I think helps drive this local interest that we have here. But Cincinnati I was fortunate because a lot of things that we know about cicadas come from Brood 10 emergence years. And that's because the 19th century, and this will happen this year as well, Brood 10 emerged in Philadelphia, Washington, Baltimore, and Cincinnati, 4 big cities with scientists located here, and people are writing these things down and collecting these. At the Museum Center, we've got a Brood 10 cicada that dates back to 1885.
Wow.
We've got cicadas from 1902, 1936, 1919 in the collection.
Wow, that's impressive. So let's get rid of some of the myths about cicadas. They're not going to bite you. They're not going to go after you. They just kind of fall from the trees. They're there. They're noisy, but they're really harmless, right?
That's true. They're harmless to humans. They can cause some damage to trees, but again, if it's a large mature tree, the damage will be negligible this year, and that damage is caused when the female lays her eggs in the terminal parts of the branches. If her egg laying should tear up the vascular tissue, the leaves will wither, turn brown. Sometimes that branch will break at that point, and it'll look unsightly. But there was a paper published in 1869 titled "Out of Evil Cometh Good." And what was noted was in 1869 was orchardists were reporting to have a massive bumper crop of their fruit trees. And it was realized that the year before was a cicada emergence. And that year happened to be a dual emergence. Brood 10 came out along with brood 19. And all that egg laying was like a natural pruning. And so all these trees that had suffered all this egg laying damage that didn't kill the tree, but it resulted the next year in a greater flower set and fruit production that they expected. So it's one of the few benefits to a periodical cicada emergence that will allow the trees that do have oviposition or egg laying damage, those trees may produce more flowers next year. And that's beneficial. You know, we're losing tens of thousands of trees of ash trees to the emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
The increased production of seeds this next year may help fill in that gap and help the region to recover in the long run.
Wow, that is fascinating. You mentioned that the study of cicadas brought you here to Cincinnati. What is it about cicadas? Where did you pick up the idea that you wanted to study cicadas and really specialize in cicadas?
Well, I'm a bit of a frustrated historian. I love history. And I'm very much into. I've written a book on beekeeping of ancient Egypt, so and I also love dinosaurs. But when I was an undergraduate and I first heard about periodical cicadas, I realized that this is an insect where the tools of historical research could be valuable. You know, in science we have the scientific method: observation, hypothesis, experimentation, theory. That everybody learns that in their science classes. In history, we look at sources. There's primary sources, secondary sources, tertiary sources. And as a reporter, you know that you're looking, who's going to be a better witness? The person who was actually there, or somebody who was down the street, and if you read, is a written record as good or what have you? Mm-hmm. And I realized that with cicadas, that there must be thousands of historical records out there that we don't have. And so while I was in graduate school, I started mining historical records. And by the time I finished my PhD, I had right around 7,000 historical records of periodical cicada emergences, going back to 1634. Wow. And brood 10 was first reported in 1715. And first time it was reported here in southwest Ohio was 1817 in Claremont County. Mm. And we got records in Cincinnati from 1834, 51, 68, 85, 1902. It goes on.
Wow, they're their own history.
And it ties it in with all sorts of neat stuff. It's for example, in 1970, Princeton University gave Bob Dylan an honorary degree, and he's sitting on the platform next to Coretta Scott King, who's also getting an honorary doctorate, and the two were talking and what have you, and the cicadas are screaming in the distance. After the commencement, he left. He wasn't the speaker that day. He just got the award, the degree. He took off his cap and gown, gave it to somebody at the platform support staff, and got in a car and left. And he went home and wrote a song, "The Locust Sang for Me." And one of my favorite stories that came out was in 1902, Theodore Roosevelt gave an address at Arlington National Cemetery Memorial Day when the cicadas were out. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, after his wife and mother died within a 24-hour period, to get over his grief, he bought an interest in a cattle ranch in western North Dakota. I'm from North Dakota originally. And so Teddy Roosevelt's one of my heroes. And while he's out there, he walks at Harvard, and here was this barrel-chested individual who, while riding horses and herding cattle, learned to project his voice over a herd of cattle. In 1902, when he gave this address to Arlington Cemetery, the cicadas almost drowned him out. And little stories like that. And then you find parallels in history. In 1783, Revolutionary War soldiers stormed Independence Hall for back pay. They just signed the peace agreement ending the Revolutionary War. And these Revolutionary War soldiers storming Independence Hall so startled the representatives there, they left and fled to New Jersey. What does that sound like? I mean, things happen in cicada, brood 10 cicada emergence years that seem to repeat themselves somehow. And so that's what I find things like that quite intriguing, quite interesting.
That's fascinating. Well, I like the analogy about the Reds winning every time the brood 10 comes up. I do like that, and it holds true again this year. This is my third go around. My first one was 1987, so I cannot wait to welcome them back and learn a little bit more about their history and our history. Dr. Kritsky, thank you so much. We do appreciate your insight. All the best, and enjoy cicada season.
Thank you very much. You too.